I'm here this year for an entire month in Ireland, and I ask myself constantly, how on earth did I, an American who spent most of her life being afraid of poetry, who comes from a society where poetry is at best marginalized, how did I end up coming to recite poetry in Ireland? Where whatever your feelings and whatever your, what was the word, educational trauma may have been around poetry, you walk a land where there are museums dedicated to writers, and there is a great, great pride somewhere in the very land, in the power of the word. And you come from a land, my friend Anne O'Reilly has been educating me, where at least at the very beginning, the knowledge was that a poet was a seer, was a priest, was a druid, was a wise one, was a priestess, was one who melted the veil between the visible and the invisible. While I did spend most of my life being afraid of poetry and believing it was the language of a society that I had not been invited to enter, and feeling left out, I spent that time as a wanderer through the fields of consciousness, following my life hunger for real, authentic, naked connection. So one of the ways that I love to explore poetry, you've probably already figured that out, is by putting it together with music, which is really, really backwards in a way, because poetry began as one with music. Poetry arose about 1.8 million years ago. Poetry arose from the human voice at the point where the inner life was so overflowing that it could no longer be communicated through hand signals. So poetry was the first language that arose from the ancient humans or humanoids, or I forget what you're supposed to call them. There's a correct word now, but I can't remember it. Poetry was the first language that arose. And it arose not just as poetry, but as poetry and music at the same time. It was what archaeologists call a musa-language. And then even when language became language and music became music, no one would speak a poem without strumming a lyre or with without some kind of musical accompaniment. So it took many years to even separate music and poetry. And it's been brought back together in many, many ways, and I think many, many of the Irish traditions have brought it back together. One of the ways I like to do it is by creating a kind of sonic journey out of the poem. I'm thinking of this more and more as a shamanic experience, where I will, when I'm lucky enough to work with amazing musicians, and I will speak poems inside the music. The music isn't the background. The music and the poems are the river together. And what happens in that is that sometimes people say, well, I couldn't hear all the words. I wish you'd turn the music down. You know, sometimes they're right. But for the most part, what I encourage is, fine, do you hear all the words when you listen to a song on the radio? Do you hear all the words when you're listening to an opera? There's a way that the mind wants to clamp and hold the words that the music makes impossible. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you into that experience of not being able to hold the words and just seeing how they pour over you, the way you would allow a sacred medicine to pour through your system, or a symphony to pour through your energy field. When you go to a symphony, you don't go to catch, oh, that was an incredible trill, you know, or wow, that bar, I really want to repeat that bar. You go, I think anyway, you go to listen to yourself in the steeping, in the marinade of the music.